gentlemen, welcome to the World Cloud Show Africa. My name is Pavlovati, and right now we're on our final panel discussion, which is a cloud and data AI panel discussion on the topic Secure Cloud and Data Infrastructure for Africa, how enterprises can protect their data from the next generation of cyber threats. Well, the topics we're looking at covering are cyber security concerns of cloud technology. We're looking at talking about safe to the core, keeping cybersecurity in the core of your IT infrastructure. We're looking at talking about cloud security, the modern ways to protect your organization's cloud data storage, cloud technologies to provide a safe work environment. How has risk management changed with technology evolution? Latest cybersecurity technologies to safeguard your cloud infrastructure transformation, and world will never be the same. How the enterprises are adapting to the new post-COVID-19 cyber reality. Well, with this, we're joined by our eminent panelists. First up, Winnie Sergon, who's the head of ICT and Innovation, Boresha SACCO Society Limited, Kenya. Winnie is a strategic thinker, innovative leader, technology lover, and a cybersecurity enthusiast with interest in problem solving through automation. Thank you so much, Winnie, for joining us on the same. We're also joined by Rohit, Dhawan, the Chief Information Officer, Bank of Kigali, Rwanda, who's joining us. Rohit is the CIO for the Bank of Kigali. The bank is the largest commercial bank in Rwanda and is listed as one of the top 100 banks in African continent. The bank is focused on adopting and delivering innovation for the digital banking to empower the community. Thank you so much, Rohit, for joining us today at the World Cloud Show. Also joining our eminent panelists is Taz, who's the Section Head ICT Mimosa Mining Company, Zimbabwe. Taz has over 12 years of experience in development and management of information and communication technology. As a certified information security professional, CISSP, his particular focus is on cybersecurity, but he has vast knowledge in the areas of IT governance, infrastructure, project management, and service delivery. Thank you so much, Taz, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And joining us next is Peter French on your stage and stream, GM for Middle East and Africa, Acronis city of Cape Town. A technologist, entrepreneur, and a thinker at heart, Peter comfortably inhabits both the technology and business world. As a senior leader in the backup and cyber production industry, his success rests on his ability to grow an ecosystem based on meaningful long-term relationships. Thank you so much, Peter, for joining us today. Also joining our panelists, it is time now to introduce to you the moderator of this session. We're joined by Vukosi Sambo, the head of data solutions, Medscheme, South Africa. Well, Vukosi is a global top 100 data visionary advisory board member, mentor, and a frequent keynote speaker, moderator at data and technology leadership conferences and roundtables. Thank you so much, Vukosi, for joining us today.
Thank you, Bhavana, and welcome everyone.
So with this, yes, please, because you were saying something.
Just to take it away, if you don't mind.
Yes.
Welcome everyone. Welcome to this interesting last show for our cyber security discussion. So I'd like to kickstart with Peter for a very specific reason. Obviously, what COVID did was that it accelerated adoption of cloud for most enterprises. And I think, there's a saying that always says, there are no poopless cows. It has brought its challenges. And I think that's why we are having this discussion today, being the increased number of potential cyber threats and attacks. What does this mean, for enterprises, and what has been the key trends as a result of this exponential increase in cloud adoption for cybersecurity for enterprises, thinking of you or seeing you coming from that area of specialty as a provider of this solution?
Fantastic. Indeed, it has been quite an acceleration or transformation into and rapid adoption of cloud solutions, cloud-based services, and remote access specifically. In doing so, what we've had to do, almost, dare I say, we've had to punch holes initially into traditionally secure networks and secure systems to allow for remote access, work from home behavior. Of course, many companies, have been doing this as the standard course of business for many, many years. But the pandemic accelerated this requirement. And in doing so, many businesses who did not believe they were so online or dependent quickly learned and quickly faced many, or conducted many exercises to ready themselves for this. Unfortunately, in doing so, the challenges presented, some of them are, I won't say cheap and nasty, but you're trying to solve a problem where people can start working as fast as possible remotely. So you maybe haven't done due diligence on the varying technologies or approaches out there to allow for secure remote access, for being able to audit full access, to being able to isolate and lock down and implement an architectural structure of least privilege necessarily. And I think that was one of the biggest challenges faced, is the rapid introduction of new attack surfaces into company systems. That said, fast forward a year, I think many lessons have since been learned, and companies are not able yet to celebrate and say, we've done it, but they've taken bounds and leaps forwards into this space. And, we have accelerated this transformation because of this, or thanks to this global pandemic.
Thanks, Peter. And I think to take one thing, you say cheap and nasty. And I think most organizations generally, obviously, we had to pivot very quickly. We had to keep the lights on, and we had to really rapidly move to make sure that things keep going. And I think, like you say, a year later now, most of us have had an opportunity to take a step back and say, how do we start doing this right now that we have accelerated our adoption of cloud-based solution, and what does this mean for our cybersecurity solution? So really, thank you for those insights. And I want to really just take Rohit next and see and hear from your side, from a financial services perspective in banking, probably one of the areas that would have potentially been more ahead of the curve than most sectors around this, and what this meant for you at the beginning of COVID and fast forward 18 months later.
So thank you so much for having me on this show and the panel. And interesting perspective. If you understand that the banks were already on a journey to digitize most of their activities, and with the COVID, everything just got accelerated. Now, in our approach, because bank is a risk institution, all the conversations around cybersecurity and all the activities that are done, they're primarily based around what risks we carry and what is our appetite. Now, one of the significant advantages that we had was that our cybersecurity team within the bank always took a cautious approach. And then when technology solutions were being implemented, we were also looking at the use cases of how they will be used, what ring fencing we can do for them, and how we could bring technology, process, and people together to service the customer. Now, this also created other issues for us in the market, because customers were demanding services, and they were not even aware of what tools, how, and what to do to receive these digital services, because a few of the customers already have a challenge. They don't have a consistent technology background, and they don't understand cybersecurity that well. So we had to take an approach, and the most difficult approach is doing things in a simple manner. So for a customer, it is supposed to be simple. For it became a mountain for us, because we had to climb a mountain, keep it simple for the customer, but also maintain the aspects of risk and security. So 18 months down the line, we are looking at another lockdown happening. That's going to happen in Rwanda, and we're all geared up now. So whatever we've learned in the last 18 months is going to get practiced now. And hopefully, we are always ahead of the curve when it comes to cybersecurity. Thank you.
No, that's great to hear. And I mean, it reminds me of the iceberg. You know, people always see the simplicity on the top, but everything that is happening underneath, the complexities, the sleepless nights, I can imagine in your role. Taz, coming in, I think, you know, you come from one of the more traditional kind of industries, mining, you know, and people may be wondering, what are you even doing in this in this panel, you know? Can you just, you know, enlighten us to say what has been your journey from a sector point of view in Zim, and how have you tackled this challenge of the rapid adoption of cloud technologies and what it has meant from a security perspective?
I think just as you put it, what am I doing here from a mining perspective? Because when you look at mines, the work is really centered around one specific location. So work from home takes on a completely different meaning when you're talking about mines. But we also are definitely supported by a lot of soft services, soft skills that did have to obviously remove themselves from danger, so to speak. So I want to buttress on what Peter mentioned with regards to the increase in the amount of attack surfaces. And I was reading a very interesting report by McAfee that about 630% increase in cloud accounts were attacked in 2020. And that's a huge increase, you know. And from someone who's in a very traditional architecture where you have a data center, you protect your perimeter, we had to move very quickly. And it's unfortunate for a lot of organizations, I think across the board, across the world, that a lot of IT professionals were given what we would like to call probably a green light to break protocol. And by that, I mean that when you deploy a lot of these technologies, it's important that you take cognizance of the fact that your on-premise management systems, that's your policies, your procedures, your segregation of duties, your privileged access management, all of that needs to be migrated, obviously, to the cloud. Because the truth of the matter is that if you have an administrator, I'll take an example from Microsoft on local Active Directory, that administrator can do whatever they want as well on Azure, unless you move away from the out-of-box approach and you configure the heck out of it. Another very interesting statistic that I found quite shocking last night, actually, is something that Gartner released, that 99% of cloud security incidents into 2025 will actually be the customer's fault. And I feel that this has been brought about by the false confidence that we get from a lot of the free services that are out there, like your Gmail, your Yahoo, and all that. If I ask everybody, yeah, when was the last time your Gmail or free service was down? It's probably never. And because of that, we think that everything will be okay. But the truth of the matter is when you look at the fine print, the contract, you realize that in most cases, the backup, the disaster recovery, the protection of your data still resides with the client. So those are the things that a lot of companies need to really consider in terms of their cloud security infrastructure, that it's not all daisies and roses. You have to do something about it. You have to bolt on some sort of security to the cloud. Thanks for question.
Thanks, Taz. And I think, you know, you summarized it quite nicely for me to say it's a transformation kind of an agenda. So people, processes, technology, they all need to come together. You cannot just think that is just a technology solution that you just put pampering on the cracks because it's going to hit you down the line. Winnie, just to bring you as well into this discussion, from Kenya, what have been some of the key challenges on your side? You are also in the financial services industry. Have you been in a kind of like a similar level of maturity that Rohit has spoken about, or where are you guys at, and what does this mean, this acceleration in cloud adoption for most enterprises?
Okay, thank you so much for that question. And in Kenya and most of the organizations talk of the financial sector and the likes, you find that they are within the transformation journey. I would say transitioning to the cloud is a transformation, is a journey whereby you check what areas and what concerns can you take to the cloud. For example, there are 3 areas. There's the network, there's the application, and there's the security of the same. So you realize that most of the organizations, most of the financial institutions are on a hybrid model, partly on-prem, partly on cloud, and specifically with now a defined way of what are on cloud. You find most of the people are using, with the COVID acceleration, you find most of the people move to Office 365 or Google Suite. That is already a step ahead in terms of availability on the cloud. Number two, you'll find that the servers could be hosted on-prem, and you find that the DR and also the backups are on cloud. So it's more of an hybrid situation, but nevertheless, the journey is continuous. And when we look at 5 years from now, or even 3 years from now, by 2025, it will be more of a cloud architectural design, because you find that it's very heavy to invest on a technology like MPLS, connecting your number of branches that you have. It's very weighty to employ a security professional to handle the security and the security of your own prem kind of architecture. It's very weighty to have internet connection, dialing in from the client side and having the availability to the infrastructure that you have. So when you look at the future of this cloud transformation, in 3 years' time, it will be more of a cloud-based architecture in 90% of the organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, Winnie. And I just want to bring back Peter, and you ended it off quite nicely. So Peter, bringing you back in, obviously, one thing that has been consistent is that the complexity is increasing here. And when we trace back the past couple of years of cloud adoption, we moved from where people at first were not trusting the security in the cloud to the advocacy around cloud is more secure than even on-prem. And now we seem to be questioning parts of that again, you know, because of these increased complexities. And I think people like you, in terms of the solutions that you provide, you kind of now coming in with that expect support and solutions to help solve most of that complexity. Would you say that without a specialist focus on this issue, the assumed stock standard security that you would get when you purchase your, say, a public cloud solution with one of the key providers is sufficient? Or what has been some of the key learnings around how safe is cloud, public cloud more specifically?
Look, I hate to bring this comment in here, but you know, cloud is effectively, you know, your system running on someone else's computer or your application running on someone else's computer. You need to treat it as such. In other words, you still need to consider it as an extension of your local network if you have tied your services natively to it. Of course, there are factors that they cater to, such as high availability and, in some instances, you know, disaster recovery or remote replication, which cater to certain catastrophic outages that your own infrastructure might not have, although in an enterprise environment, you will also have that into consideration. But the access control, the limitation of the framework that you implement to secure this should not be handed over to your cloud provider without them taking it over from you. In other words, if you're buying an extended security suite or solution, sure, then you can entrust that role to them. If you are attributing or recruiting a security specialist to take care of it, then you hand over the reins of security. But if you're just provisioning a server in hypercloud X, Y, or Z, it's not secure by design. It's publicly available by design. It's ready for the world to access by design. And one wrong toggle or switch in your provisioning platform could mean your data is publicly available or not. So yeah, it's not inherently more secure, but also it's not inherently less secure in design. I mean, a public cloud architecture, they're actively maintained. Their operating systems and their hypervisors and their networks are actively monitored and secured and controlled, and also perused or hammered away by potential perpetrators and hackers on an ongoing basis. So they're aware of their weak points. it doesn't mean they're going to protect yours in your systems that you're hosting on them. I mean, the most painful example is, you know, we're hosting our, not us, but a company hosts their, or shifts their accounting server or something of the sort to the cloud. And they say, great, we now have cloud computing and we have remote desktop services available. And we publish this application via RDP to all of our users. And now we have this single, you know, port that people can attack and, you know, run a TCP grinder against or something like that. It's publicly exposed. Sure, the operating system is secure, it's up to date. Yeah, of course, besides 0 days and the likes that might be dormant there, which, you know, we cannot even speak to on that specific topic because that's cloud and on-premise, that issue. But we can introduce new threats and new risks in this migration to cloud if we don't know what the risks are in the first place. It doesn't change much on-premise and in the cloud, other than the ports of entry are worth considering. And what I mean by that, in the cloud, if your network is locked down, you control the perimeter. On-premise, if your network is locked down, you control the perimeter. I connect my premise with my cloud. Now there's 2 points of entry. There's my network and there's the cloud, and there's a trust architecture between the two. So by having my cloud accessible, I could be exposing my local network and vice versa. So yeah, we do introduce a lot of complexity, but it's about having the know-how and also having trusted advisors, trusted vendors who are there to discombobulate or reduce this complexity for you. And it could be a stack of solutions or technologies. It could be an architecture, a policy, or a framework that helps you deal with that. But yeah, absolutely. It's not all doom and gloom. It is complex. It is more expensive, but there is hope still.
And then Rohit, I mean, and I think Winnie can jump in after Rohit here. Coming from a financial services and banking, probably you guys are the most of the paranoid around all of this. And, you know, and the saying goes, only the paranoid will survive. So I suppose it serves you guys very, very well. How much control in your guys' architectures have you kind of like released to the cloud provider versus the level of control that you have kept on your own? And also, what does this mean for the changing landscape of risk management overall, including the governance structures around it, you know, because we're all saying that data is the new oil or soil or whatever your term is. And at the center of risk management going forward, surely will be data. And this sits at the center of that. And have we seen the conversation also start changing at different governance structures within organizations, including yours?
Thank you. A long question, I would say. So that touches on many points. Let me take it down to the basics first. Today, whenever you're looking at cloud, it comes from the experience of developers. Every developer today thinks that they can write an application, run it on cloud, and it will be secure, or it will be operational and it will be resilient. You know, those factors are just like, oh, I'll write some code, it'll work on cloud tomorrow morning. Let's put it in production. And I'm like, if you understand what is required to be done to secure an application, to secure the whole ecosystem, it's not about cybersecurity only. It's about the longevity of the application, the serviceability, the load computations, everything needs to be done. So it's not a small conversation when somebody wants to write an application. The problem emanates from the fact that the government and the regulators have realized that cloud is not a solution to everything. It is, first of all, as Peter mentioned, it's not stock. There is nothing called a stock. You know, everything when it comes to software has to be customized to your requirement, be it through a configuration or be it through writing more code. It is customized. Securing networks between two locations, well, paramount. Otherwise, everybody would be listening into what you're doing and they'll be playing around. The kids who are just learning to do port scans would come into your organization and go into your cloud infrastructure and play with it without realizing what they're doing. So it's like, you build a wall and you build a wall so high, at least you have a lot of people backing off saying that, well, they are secure in a way. Only the pertinent ones get through, and then you create multiple layers of it. Now, from a governance structure internally, what we've done and what the government supports is that we analyze everything from the word which says whenever you're developing something, you go through a design process, you go through a evaluation process, and a paramount part of that design process is security. So we are a financial institution, so identity security is paramount for us. Transactional security is paramount for us. Consistency is paramount for us. So whenever a customer is coming to us, they assume that we will have secured all of these items. So which means that all these services that we build, they have to be strong, they have to be consistent, and they have to be secure as well. So given that light, from the senior management perspective, what we've done is we've created a structure which allows innovation. But during that innovation conversation, we allow a review process to also go through, which allows people to come together, review all the patterns that they are trying to deploy versus the current exposure we have to the cybersecurity threats. And then obviously we've got a cybersecurity team that does an amazing amount of hand-holding, testing and checks and rechecks over a period. And they, sometimes you deploy an application, they come back to you 3 months later saying that, listen, we've identified that this thing is now not secure and it's vulnerable, so let's patch it up. And it just takes precedence over everything else. So your pipeline of delivery is also impacted by the cybersecurity team, because they can prioritize based on what they feel as a threat and not only the business requirements. So you would see a lot of people talking about agile development. You would see a lot of people talking about their backlogs and storyboards. Here we have a storyboard where cybersecurity go insert a story on the top of the stack saying, listen, this is the top priority, stop everything, this goes first.
Interesting, right? And I'll come back to that later on around the agile delivery and changing the way of working, especially as we even move forward. So just hold that thought. Winnie, as well from a financial services perspective, what's the level of paranoia that you guys are dealing with, and what has that meant for the kind of controls that you put in place versus the ownership that you may be giving to the cloud provider?
Okay, I'll concur with what my fellows have just mentioned. Just to add on that is the fact that understanding what you need as a user is very key. And number two is these cloud solutions are not free. You have a provider whom you're working with. And what I would say an additional perspective is that understanding the characteristics or what you need to have as a checklist as you onboard the provider that you're choosing to work with is very key. For example, do you have the flexibility to log into to your cloud? Do you have the flexibility to access your data? Do you have control over the data that you have over the cloud? Do you have the flexibility that you can move from one provider to another one? So it's more of an roundtable discussion that can always be advised from an IT point in terms of how secure is this provider that we are going to work with? What kind of security solutions have they entrenched in place for your systems to be secure? How is their reputation with other people they have worked with? So when you check around also the provider of the cloud solution, we find that you're more safer when you have your checklist well tied up, in addition to the security that you reinforce as in person. So that's what I can at the group, and I would really, really wish to make sure that each and every person, as you think about the transformation journey, please have a checklist on the kind of the provider that you want to work with. Thank you.
Definitely. Thanks for that advice, Winnie. Taz, you know, it might be a myth, but you tell us here, you know, people always say in sectors like yours, you are dealing with less sensitive information than you would in financial services, or in my case, in healthcare. But, you know, is it true, firstly? And if it is, you know, do you think that your job is a lot less stressful than Rohit and Winnie and, you know, people like myself in the mining in the mining sector?
I'm struggling not to make any comment about Rohit and his full head of hair. And I can see he's laughing very hard. But I think it's very unfair to put it in that perspective, to say who's got more stress. But firstly, in terms of our workloads, in terms of the myth of the sensitivity of our data in industry such as ours, two words, colonial and pipeline. And that in itself is the biggest stress that you could ever think about. Because if I was to say that here we run some SCADA systems, and a lot of industrial organizations run very, for lack of a better word, legacy systems. And I know a lot of banks, I'm struggling not to mention names here, but I know some banks that ran Windows XP for a very long time and extended it for a very long time. So with large organizations, large implementations, that's always a challenge. And rather than the concern around PII, personally identifiable information, we're now talking about industrial espionage. We're now talking about cyber warfare, because crippling large sectors of the economy can actually do a great deal for an economy. And again, I'll try to run away from specific countries, but these are real things that are happening. And I do also lose sleep at night because of it. And around the complexities, I was absolutely thrilled to hear Peter, especially from a vendor perspective. He said two things that were very critical that I listened to very, 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 very attentively. He said, make sure that you have a trusted vendor and or advisor. So with trust comes the ability for an advisor or a vendor to say, listen, our solution is perfect, but we can't do this. And to actually clearly define what is possible and what's not possible. So when that is done, I think, as Winnie mentioned, you can definitely check off a checklist and make sure that you've got everything in order. Then around, especially the issue to do with governance and how to attack these sort of situations, I think it's very important to train up your staff. It is beautiful to hear Rohit talk about the governance structures, and it's so important. We're asking a lot of people to learn a lot of things in a very short space of time. And if we don't support them with the right training, we're putting them into the deep end for no reason at all. So that being said, I think as well, definitely on the cybersecurity side, the risk management side, and the risk structures, I've personally seen a lot of changes that are quite pleasant to see, actually. A long time ago, traditionally, you'd find that CISOs, CISOs, Chief Information Security Officers, would always report through CIOs. But I've heard increasingly a lot of calls for them to report directly to the CEO and MD, and I'm watching Rohit as I speak and his thoughts around that. But in some cases, I've actually seen even requests for that reporting structure to go all the way to the board. So it's beautiful to see, and we're seeing these things happening, and there's good reasons and intentions around them. And from our perspective, in terms of the industry, we do have to consider the complexities around cloud. Thank you for question.
Thanks, Taz. And like you said, there's no silver bullet here. The complexities of your own organization will kind of generally or should dictate how you create those structures and those governance structures all the way to the board. And thanks, myth busted. We'll never say that you've got less stresses than Rohit and Winnie and everyone else ever again. And I think, you know, going back to the point that you made, that Peter spoke about earlier on, to say, you know, this issue of trust and this increased complexity will also require that as you partner with different vendors, that trust extends also to honesty, so that, you know, you got those vendors that can say, I can do this for you, and you are not left exposed to potential threats, you know. So really very good insight and advice there, Taz. As we come to the end of this, you know, I just want to get everyone's comments in terms of the way forward. You know, we've spoken a lot about what we've learned in the last year, the last 18 months, the acceleration. If you were to just take a moment to say, what does this mean going forward for cybersecurity, for cloud adoption? What is that one thing for you? I mean, for me, it's, you know, coming a bit more from a data background, I'm excited to see how things like breach and attack simulations and the role of machine learning and AI will play in this space. But, you know, I'd like to hear from each one of you, and what are some of the cutting edge solutions that you may be designing, Peter, starting maybe with you, you know, to really gear yourself for attacks of the future.
So of course, yeah, if I could tell you about the cutting edge solutions, like, I think, yes, that is something to speak to, because as we know, the threats are evolving, the challenges are evolving, and the risks too change. So, but sometimes it's a lot simpler than that. It's not so much about the bleeding edge or cutting edge. It's about implementing what we know and, you know, what's established correctly and completely. Because yes, we can look to the bleeding edge. We can look to, you know, the latest technology and AI-based machine learning detection and endpoint detection and response, which, yes, these two form part of a good secure strategy. But it's that and what we already have been doing, what we already know, and reinforcing that. So it's a combination of, you know, tried and trusted or tested technologies, and supported by the new bleeding edge, and underpinned by the people, the human element. I think that's the most critical focal point there in any cybersecurity strategy, and any strategy that involves people. It should be the people, because we are the point of entry. We are the attack surface. We are what people go after in a social engineering attack, in any great attack. It's, you know, the people are the easiest, the softest target. That said, the vendors also have a responsibility. And as we've seen now in numerous supply chain attacks with prominent managed service provider companies, that too is something to consider, because I alluded to it, and Taz, you spoke about it now, about the trust with the supplier, with the vendor. But what happens if they get compromised? So it's doing your due diligence on your vendors, ensuring that, you know, even though there is this trust, it's not a resignation of your own responsibility and your own due diligence by assigning or attributing this trust. Going forward, though, it's really exciting. I mean, what we're doing at Acronis with our integrated approach to cybersecurity, making it easy to implement, easy to procure, easy to configure solution for the mass market. It's not just for the enterprise, it's not for the home user, it's everyone in between. It's putting it together in a digestible and understandable and affordable package. I think that's what really excites me, and the opportunity there, the transition towards this to an integrated, secure approach. And of course, just this cloud explosion that we've witnessed. That, I mean, I've been living in the clouds for many years, as I've been told, but it's nice to see the rest of the world, you know, participating in this too now.
Thanks, Peter. You know, that's quite exciting, and I like what you say is people, and people. And I suppose maybe in the future we should have a discussion around cybersecurity for social good, and I think it would be quite an interesting topic. Unless if any of you you are already thinking that way and doing work around that, even say for your customers. Winnie, just a final closing comments for you. Looking forward, what are some of the exciting trends and focus areas that you'll be focusing on?
Okay, most of the focus areas and trends that we're looking at is machine learning and the business analytics more, because you realize that we are living in a world where data is being created more and more. Every minute there's a transaction, every second there's a transaction, and they keep on growing by the day. So for this analysis to happen real time and also to get alerts and everything that all is flowing seamlessly, is to have more of machine learning and business intelligence, and with flags that can be able to tell you that all is well or there's a flaw, so that at least the team can move in swiftly and fix any kind of outlier kind of transaction or any kind of flaw within the processes. So that's what I'm looking forward to more and more. And the cloud has come in handy because most of these things are now accessible anywhere, anytime, anyhow. Thank you.
Thank you, Winnie. Thank you so much for those insights. Tez, taking you, how does this, evolve for you guys in the mining sector? I mean, the industry itself is evolving from a digitalization perspective. What are some of the next exciting elements or trends that you are paying close attention to?
I think definitely from a cybersecurity perspective, when we talk about AI and machine learning as well, it's definitely very exciting. But for me personally, I think what also makes it even more exciting is the thought of bolting on quantum computing onto that, because the amount of processing that can happen, the speed at which you could actually have AI working at in the next 10 years, there's some amazing work being done by IBM, is really exciting. And it's difficult not to ramble about it, because if you look at some companies, they are even creating what they call immune systems, where they look at behavioral patterns, usages, statistics, and can actually make intelligent decisions that can protect your crown jewel, so to speak, because of that. So for me, the total collective of the increased processing power and the fact that it will be much cheaper since it will be in the cloud, and into already progressive technologies such as your AI and your AML, that's very exciting. And I think in terms of closing remarks, at the risk of using a millennial cliche, I would say stay woke. And that's for every individual, that's for every business. And by that, I really mean that as much as right now we're at the cloud show, our heads are in the clouds, let's ensure that we don't have our heads in the sand, and let's have our heads in the game. Let's ensure that our information security management systems are up to speed. Let's make sure that our BCP, our DR, our incident response plans are speaking very well to our cloud workloads. And by doing that, our organizations, individually, we do have a chance of cyber resilience. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Tez. Yeah, thanks, Tez, for those closing comments. I'm going to be a bit unfair to you, Rohit, before I hand over back to Bhavana. Just maybe, be creative. One word. What will be that one bullet word for you in terms of going forward?
Bold.
Thanks. Sorry for putting you on the spot.
No worries. So I would say be bold. You take a risk-based approach. Where you don't have risk, adopt cloud. Where you have risk, take a very calculated approach. Don't fall prey to how do I say this? A walk that everybody is walking. So don't try to copy people. Try to do what you want to do. That's the only thing I can say.
Awesome. Thanks everyone. Thanks Peter, Rohit, Winnie, Taz, for such an insightful discussion. I think I've learned a lot myself, and there's a lot that I will take back personally into my own organizations. And I hope that our audience has really enjoyed today's conversation. Thank you, everyone. Connect with everyone here on LinkedIn and, ask more questions, and we'll be able to really just get back to you. And Bhavana, back to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vikosi. Kudos on an excellent moderation right there. Thank you so much, Taz, Rohit, Peter, and Winnie, for your insightful take on the topics which were presented to you and the questions which were presented. So thank you once again for your valuable time.